Hello and welcome back to the YouTube studio here at the Berlin Global Dialogue. I'm joined by Ola Källenius, the CEO of Mercedes. Very nice to meet you and thank you for joining us here today.
Yeah, thank you. Great to be with you.
I want to start by referencing another moment from this event. Yesterday, Chancellor Scholz talked about what he sees as a new multipolar future for the world as we move towards a world less dictated by binary powers and with more different countries getting involved. How do you think that a company like Mercedes reacts to that kind of change and economies more generally?
If you look at it from a company point of view or an industrial point of view, still our main markets are the big three economic regions. Europe, our home base, obviously China being the biggest car market in the world, and North America, and other big markets such as Korea, Japan, Australia, and so on. But even for us, we are active in more than 150 countries around the world. And what we see is economic potential. Where is India going to be 10, 20 years from now? Sure. We have a good base there. How can we grow? See a lot of potential in the Middle East, in the rest of Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia. South America, there's a discussion about finally getting the trade agreement between the EU and South America done. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
So for us, it's not an either or.
Okay. It
is growing in the big established markets, of course. We will try to continue to do that. But we're also looking for new horizons and maybe have over-proportional growth in some of those future markets.
Do you see any specific challenges as you shift towards that new reality, or is it primarily an opportunity?
Well, I think one thing we shouldn't forget is the WTO-driven trend over more than 30 years towards opening up markets has created a lot of wealth. It's made economies grow and it's created wealth and it's really been a win-win all around. Now that we have been observing over the last 5-6 years, here and there some more inward-looking, maybe a little bit more protectionistic trends, I'm just hoping that policymakers don't forget what has made us successful.
Yes.
So once you start reducing open markets or limiting competition, usually that is not a recipe for wealth growth and GDP growth. So we're hopeful and we advocate for keeping the open system and the global markets open, have a level playing field, same rules of engagement, competition, but maybe bring some more members into this economic and trade system. If that is done in the right way, it is definitely an opportunity, but there are some risks around protectionism. There are no two ways about it.
Yeah, protectionism is a really important issue because we're seeing a rise of it not only from countries like China who have tended towards it for a while, but even in the US, looking at things like the Inflation Reduction Act, which has fundamentally changed the US domestic economy. I'm curious from a more European perspective, both business and economic, how we think it's best to respond to those changes. What can we do as a continent to ensure that our businesses and our economies continue to thrive?
Well, we're on a journey of transformation at the moment where all industries are looking at what does the decarbonization scenario look like. In the case of the auto industry in our company is how do we go zero emission, but not just with the car, with the whole value chain, our suppliers, our own operations, obviously, the product and the product in use. So that when certain economic regions incentivize going towards zero emission quicker, that is, of course, generally a good thing because that's the journey that we're on. But at the same time, if there's then elements in that closes or kind of distorts open trade, those are things that need to be watched very, very carefully. So from a European point of view, I would certainly not respond by thinking inward. I would only try to think outward, make sure that Europe is an attractive investment case. Capital finds return on investment. What makes Europe special? How can we strengthen Europe to make that return on investment greater? And it's certainly not by building up trade barriers. It's not going to help in this situation. Look at the factor costs and look at the other things that have made us successful and can make us successful also in the future.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the green transition there, which is obviously a major topic at this event and all events like this around the world. And it's one that's going to fundamentally shape our society, and as a car company, is one that will impact your business in particular. So I'm curious what your thinking is around that transition, both as a business and more broadly.
Well, we have made a very clear statement with what we call Ambition 2039. We kind of worked backwards. We took the Paris Climate Agreement with the target, the 2050 target, as that is the ambition that more or less all countries around the world have signed up to. What do you then need to do as a car company? If you take roughly maybe a 10-year turnover of your car park, that's how we came with 2039, 2040, 2039. So 10 years before Paris, we should be CO2 neutral. Okay. Is it possible to do that? This is a statement that we made in 2019. So we said, let's give ourselves 20 years time. It sounds like a long time, but in the car industry, it's really not. It's actually only 3 vehicle generations.
Sure.
So the way we measure it, it's relatively quickly. And then we set out targets along those verticals, talking to our suppliers and looking into really down to the last nut and bolt. You know, where does it come from? Where is the raw material come from? What processes do you have to get it to the part that we use, and so on and so forth. We have made huge progress on our production side. We're literally putting photovoltaic on every Mercedes roof around the world where it makes sense. We're in the process of realizing 2 very large wind projects in Germany, one on our own premises and another together with a partner in the Baltic Sea too. Actually make sure that our production uses non-fossil based energy.
Yeah.
So we have set concrete targets for every single aspect of our business in the next few years, obviously. In 2030, we're not going to wait until 2039. It's something you have to have some milestones on the way. I'm not going to pretend that it's not a Herculean task.
Of course.
It really, really is. And when we made that 2039 ambition, we probably had more question marks than exclamation marks at the time.
Yeah.
But I am a technology optimist, and I can see that more and more of the question marks are turning themselves into exclamation marks.
Sure.
So we are making progress. Don't expect a straight line. Expect some ups and downs on this roller coaster ride. But the strategic target is clear. It's going zero emission.
And looking towards 2039, we're obviously a few years into that objective. You say there's ups and downs. Where are you sitting at the moment? Are we on target for you achieving that goal? What does it look like?
We have taken the first steps. We have put together a lot of the building blocks in terms of the actual reduction. I have to be honest, it's just been the first few small steps.
Sure.
But if you take the average CO2 burden of the fleet that we sell per year, in terms of that, for the longest time, having just gone up and up and up and up and up, I think we have now come over the other side of that peak, and now we're starting to go down. Maybe it's not as quick as we would like it to be, but we have changed trajectory.
Sure.
And now we're going down, and we'll see where we are in 2030, 2035, and then ultimately in 2039. But I think just if you give yourself a target, you kind of galvanize the whole organization around it, but also your partners around it.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's half the ticket to have the ambition, and then we will figure it out along the way.
And talking about partnerships, kind of public-private partnerships are things that have got a lot of conversation at this event, talking about how private sector and public sector can work together on all kinds of big projects, whether that's around the green transition or all kinds of other things. So I'm curious what you think about the value of that kind of partnership at this point.
It's very, very important because we're really talking about a systemic shift of industry, certainly of the auto industry. And whereas the market will be able to regulate and take care of a lot of that, and we should let creativity in the market make many of those decisions, you still need some kind of a stable framework.
Yeah.
And because it's such a big systemic shift, this is a particular time in history where business and policymakers need to work very closely to try to get it right. Because you can support that transition with smart policy making and guidance, but you can also disrupt it. So I think now more than ever, even though we have always had a good and fruitful dialogue between business and policymakers, I think now more than ever, we need to intensify that. And that's why I think a format like this Berlin Global Dialogue is just the right thing at the right time.
And finally, moments ago on the main stage, Larry Fink commented that he thought there was a lack of hope in the world right now. Do you think there is a lack of hope in the world, and do you have kind of optimism and hope going forward?
So sometimes if you come home at night and you look at the news or you read the news on your app or whatever, you get the feeling that everything is going in the wrong direction. And sometimes in this country we have a tradition of being quite self-critical.
Sure.
Yeah. To be self-critical on the one hand is a good thing because you challenge yourself to maybe do better.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, we should not lose our can-do attitude here. So here I would say, in terms of industry and what is our company doing, we're thinking optimistically about the future. We see this technological opportunity. It's not just about the electric drivetrain, it's also about everything that's going on the digital side, which is, a total revolution going on over there. And we invest this year alone 15 billion euro into R&D, CapEx and different things. We would not take that amount of capital and invest into new technologies if we didn't think that there was a bright future and a decent return on that investment.
Of course.
So I think many of the companies, whereas they are wary about the overall macro situation, are not cautious. We're pushing forward.
Sure, that makes sense. And good to hear some optimism, I think. Thank you so much for your time. It's been really interesting.
Thank you.